Well, let's get started. Thank you so much, everyone. Welcome. We're so glad that you're here to join us today for the AIA Annual Meeting Submission webinar that's hosted by the Programs Department at the Archaeological Institute of America and co-sponsored by the AIA Student Affairs Interest Group. My name is Katie Albert, and I am the Programs and Professional Services Coordinator here at the AIA. I'm joined today in the chat by my colleague, Meredith Langlitz, who's the Director of Programs at the AIA. She'll be monitoring the chat for us during the webinar, and some of you have been doing this already, but please feel free to share in the chat where it is you're joining us from today. Okay. So, attending the AIA annual meeting can be a great stepping stone for students and for emerging professionals as well, to connect with peers and future mentors in archaeology. The annual meeting is also a great platform to share your research projects. But if it's your first time attending an academic conference, or even just the AIA's annual meeting in particular, it can be a bit daunting to get started. This webinar will go over many of the fundamentals of submitting abstracts to the annual meeting, plus offer some other helpful information about what to expect once you get to the conference. Though the deadline for submissions are months away on August 5th, it's always good to get a head start on your abstract submission. And our panel of experts are here to help. And speaking of experts, we're joined today by several experienced annual meeting organizers and attendees, including Kevin Mullen, the Director of Meetings and the Associate Publisher of Archaeology Magazine, who works with Meredith and me here at the AIA. Dr. Megan Cifarelli, the Director of the Programming Committee, for the annual meeting. That's the group that reviews and selects submitted abstracts for presentations. Dr. Amanda Chen, who received the Graduate Student Paper Award at the 2022 annual meeting, and she's also the former chair of the Student Affairs Interest Group. And also Tina Bacali-Poyo, the current chair of the AIA Student Affairs Interest Group. Before I officially hand things over to our panelists, there are a few items of housekeeping to go over. First, I'd like you all to know that today's webinar is being recorded so that you can reference all of this information again in the future. The recording of this webinar will be available for viewing a few days from now on the AIA's YouTube channel. So for now, we ask you to please not record this presentation for yourself. We also ask you to please be respectful of the privacy of our presenters and that of your fellow audience members too. Also, towards the end of the presentation today, there'll be a chance for you to ask all of your burning annual meeting related questions. Please add all of your questions in the Zoom Q&A feature, which is located at the bottom center of your Zoom window. We hope to get to as many of these questions as we can during the Q&A portion of the webinar. And we might not be able to catch any questions that you put into the chat, so your question is far more likely to be answered if you use that Q&A feature. And lastly, but certainly not least, this webinar is co-sponsored by the AIA Student Affairs Interest Group. And to talk a little bit more about that, I'd like to welcome to the virtual podium the chair of SAIG, Tina Bacali-Poyo, PhD candidate at University of Buffalo. Tina.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, my name is Tina. All of those things are in fact true about me. I am the chair of SAIG. SAIG is the Archaeological Institute's version of a student association, but with a sassier name. I prefer our acronym over anything else. It was started by a group of students in 2003 who wanted to really make the most out of their experience as students within the Institute. And we've grown since then. And we are now kind of adjusting our mission statement to better serve and to better continue serving students within the Archaeological Institute. Because as we like to say at the Student Affairs Interest Group, it is a rare occurrence that your future is in front of you, but students are the future and we are in front of everyone. So yeah, you can email the Student Affairs Gmail account if you want to get on our list serve, or preferably, thank you, Katie, for putting my email up there. That's a much better way of, if you want a normal timed response. I am much more reachable at my email, cmbekkal at buffalo.edu. Yeah, today I will talk a little bit about finding conference funding, and particularly the travel stipends to get to the conference, because as many probably know, attending a conference is really, really expensive, and not very accessible to most people. But there are travel stipends and funds that are available. The first place that one must check, if able, is your university, and specifically your department. Start there first, because a lot of the time, individual departments end up having a specific fund for conferences for students, or they could point you in the right direction, because usually institutions have some, form of stipend to give. If your school has, if you're part of like a school club or association, usually within their literature, there are like hidden funding opportunities for conferences as well. They just involve a lot of paperwork, especially if they're like related to the union or some type of like graduate student association, but they're there to take advantage of them. I know the paperwork can be daunting, but it's worth it. And of course, there's the more traditional pipeline for funding for the annual meeting, which is the travel awards that are offered by the Archaeological Institute itself. There's one that supports a travel grant, particularly for someone who represents a traditionally underrepresented demographic in the field of archaeology, as well as a graduate student travel grant. Other than that, there are micro grants, which sometimes can be responsive, sometimes not. They're usually very overwhelmed with applicants, but there's Black Trowel Collective, which I believe is based in the Netherlands. So they're worth applying. The application is pretty easy. And I think you can apply up to either 250 or 500, it depends. And then there's also Sportula, although they privilege students of classics and like very like undergraduate students, usually over archaeologists, but they do give to archaeologists as well. And then if you have a particular interest or a paper that touches upon a very particular niche thing, look on the internet, because there are societies that are dying to fund your travel to Archaeological Institute of America. I put two up on the slide. One is the Etruscan Foundation Conference Funding Award. It's new and it's very malleable, so you can really fit a lot of things into that, and they offer up to $500. And the other is a travel stipend offered for someone who is studying the diversity of the medieval world or something related to it. So when in doubt, get creative. But yeah, I hope that was minimally helpful to whoever is out there listening. But thank you, Katie.
Thank you, Tina. Really appreciate you offering that really helpful advice. Great. So, of course, funding is a huge barrier to getting to the annual meeting, but we hope that it probably will be worth it for you. And to talk a little bit more about some of the benefits from attending the annual meeting, I'd love to welcome Dr. Amanda Chen. who is an early career scholar who's based out of the Kansas City Art Institute, and as I mentioned previously, the former chair of SAIG. Amanda, would you like to take it away?
Absolutely. Thank you, Katie. So I'm going to spend the next couple of minutes trying to convince you all why you should consider attending the AIA annual meeting. And the long and short of it is that no matter what stage you are at in the process, the AIA annual meeting has something for everyone. So next slide, please. Here is a sort of overview list of different reasons that I'm going to discuss and try to justify to you why it's a great idea to attend. So we're going to talk about sharing research, gaining experience, building connections, and having fun. But this is just one small sampling of the many reasons that there are to attend. So know that this is not exhaustive, but some of what I consider to be the most important reasons. So next slide, please. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about sharing research. The AIA annual meeting is really sort of the premier venue in the United States annually to learn about new research, to attend paper and poster sessions. And this is a really exciting opportunity because oftentimes in the field, folks are able to present their cutting edge research at the annual meeting before they can publish it. So you'll get to see the sort of newest, best research before it even goes out in print. And another really exciting angle to this is that you can actually go up to scholars who are presenting and talk to them about their ideas and your ideas. Oftentimes when we read books or articles, we have questions, things we might want to ask the author. Obviously, you can't do that when you're reading it at home, but when you're at the annual meeting, it's totally appropriate to approach someone after a talk, to ask them more questions, to get more information. And presenters love sharing these sort of conversations with you. Now, on the other side of things, it's also a great opportunity for you to present your own research, whether you're an undergraduate student, graduate student, or an early career scholar. This is important for all of us. Undergrads especially, the AIA does sort of accept and solicit paper submissions from undergraduate students. And I know the AIA has historically loved to celebrate undergraduate work. So if this is something you're interested in thinking about, I would encourage you to get in touch with an advisor and to chat with them about that. Next slide, please. Now, very practically, while you're at the AIA, and particularly when you're presenting, it's a wonderful opportunity to build your CV, to get more and more experience on there. And one facet of this is practicing presenting. I think I speak for most people when I say that the first time you ever give a public presentation, it's very daunting and it continues to be daunting, but I promise you it gets easier over time. And the best way to get past some of those nerves is just to continue practicing. And so the AIA is a really great opportunity for that. The AIA also offers various awards and honors every single year. This ranges from first prizes in the poster session to graduate student paper awards. And so not only is this sort of a boon for your CV, but from time to time, they'll come with other kinds of perks that are always appreciated. So it never hurts to throw your hat in the ring and to try for one of these awards and honors in addition to practicing presenting. Now, as you present your research at the AIA, you get valuable practice, but you also are able to get feedback from other scholars in the field. So if you're in the middle of a project, it's a really good opportunity to hear what other people think about your ideas. And oftentimes, people will approach you after your talk and they'll be excited about what you're saying. Sometimes people will be researching similar things or, you piqued an interest of theirs. And oftentimes by presenting at the AIA, it will actually lead to future opportunities. Someone might approach you or remember your name in the future and say, hey, this person presented on this really interesting subject. Let me invite them to be a panelist on a future conference panel. So that's a really awesome opportunity as well. Next slide, please. Now, the AIA is also a really important place to build new connections. You can meet other scholars and peers in the fields by attending paper and poster sessions. It's also a great way to make connections if you're interested in joining an archaeological project. I did this myself years ago when I wanted to join the project for which I am now co-director. I went to the AIA annual meeting, I approached the director, and we had a great conversation, and it led to some really amazing opportunities afterward. It's also possible to make graduate school connections. If you're interested in applying to an MA or PhD program, you might run into or meet a future advisor there, and then you can really sort of get some face-to-face time with them. And it's also possible to join interest groups. There are numerous interest groups in the AIA, and if you have a particular interest, I'm sure there is an interest group for you out there. Next slide, please. And finally, it's important to just have fun. I always look forward to the AIA to get a chance to catch up with old friends. There are numerous opportunities to make new friends, interest groups. In the past, there has been a trivia event, all kinds of mixers and receptions, and everyone is really friendly. And of course, it's also fun to explore a new city. So next slide, please. That's it for me. Again, I hope I've convinced some of you to think about joining us in Philly next year, and I hope I'll see some of you there. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Amanda. That's gotten me excited to participate in the annual meeting next year. Wonderful. So next up, to talk into some of the more nitty-gritty aspects of the annual meeting, we've got the AIA's very own Kevin Mullen to speak about some of the various types of sessions that the annual meeting offers, as well as provide an overview for the rules of submitting abstracts. Kevin?
Hello, everyone. If you do attend the meeting or do apply, you will run into me at some point in the future. I have been doing the meeting for almost 2 decades now, since I was a graduate student, and was one of the first. I was on that first group of people with the Student Affairs Interest Group many years ago. So my history runs deep at the AIA. And I want to reiterate what was already said. It's like it can be a scary prospect to think about presenting at the annual meeting, but it's something everyone really should be doing. It's really helpful, and a lot of times the feedback you'll get is invaluable. People aren't there in the audience to scare you. A lot of them realize it's a mentorship opportunity for them to help out younger scholars and students who are there. Now, just to give you a quick recap of how the meeting is structured, we have two main groups of sessions. The first are organized sessions, and these are sessions that are submitted by one person, and the whole session is constructed. A colloquia session is a number of paper presentations around a single topic. So a scholar or multiple scholars who might co-chair the session will solicit contributions, sometimes publicly, sometimes it's around a certain project and they know the group of people they wish to have as partake in the session. And then they will go ahead and submit that session as a whole, and the program committee will consider it as an entire block, and that would take up one session. A workshop is the second one, and this is a little bit different than a colloquia, and we try and they are supposed to be much more interactive. Workshop sessions, again, one or multiple organizers will submit the session, but it's intended to be shorter presentations or even demonstrations, and then a lot of back and forth with the audience, more discussion as opposed to just a straight presentation of research. So they do vary a little bit. And I do also want to note we have joint sessions. These are sessions of either type, a colloquium or a workshop, that is kind of spans the AIA as well as the Society for Classical Studies. One thing I guess we didn't mention is that it's a joint meeting with the Society for Classical Studies because we have such an overlap in membership. So some of these sessions won't be strictly archaeological or won't be strictly philological or historical. They'll meld those two together. And those, if anyone is ever participating or thinking of submitting a joint session, they have to be submitted individually to both the AIA and the SCS. For both those committees will review them independently. But for for the most part, people start presenting on their own, which also makes it a little bit scarier because you're kind of presenting your own research and putting yourself out there. And these are what we call open sessions. So this is where an individual will submit a proposal for either a paper or a poster. I'll touch on lightning session and roundtables at the end. The program committee reviews each of these on their own. So we get hundreds of these each year. Once they have gone through and decided which ones they're going to accept, the program committee will go ahead and they will create thematic sessions based upon what was accepted. So a lot of times we'll have recent research in Rome. We have a lot of kind of standard ones that come up year after year. And then sometimes we'll have some more unique ones that either relate to the theme of the meeting that year or some sort of more current theoretical topic. When you submit for either a paper or a poster, you'll get to choose what topic or theme you kind of feel applies to yours. There's a pull down in the form. So a paper obviously is something that you stand at the front of a room. There's an audience right in front of you, and hopefully you don't read your paper. I discourage everyone from actually going up there and reading a paper. Most people have a accompanying PowerPoint, and you just go ahead and you present your research. And then after each paper, there's Q&A, and at the end of that session, there would be some general discussion because they're still thematic and there's some synergies, and a lot of times. Sometimes the best interactions you get are with other presenters who have similar research, so you end up sharing with them. Posters are a little bit different. They are, again, you are presenting your research, but instead of standing in front of an audience, you literally will produce a poster, which it's a large poster. It could be up to 4 feet by 8 feet to fit on our full poster boards. We hold a poster session on the first full day of the meeting over lunch, and it lasts for about 2 hours. And at this time, it's usually in our exhibit hall, so it's a large open area. And the poster presenters stand next to their poster, and people will just come by and they'll ask questions. So it's a very individual type of discussion that you'll have back and forth with people. It can be less intimidating in some ways because you get to really address people one-on-one and have discussions instead of having to stand up and just look at the back of the room and do whatever kind of comfort you need to make sure you're not overly nervous there. And it can be a great way of presenting. I think someone had asked what's the primary difference. Sometimes posters are better for, certain types of analysis and everything to show it in a very graphical manner, and papers can work better for other types of research. But I do want to say there's not one is not better than the other. There are some preconceptions sometimes that a paper session is a more prestigious way of presenting your research than a poster. And that's absolutely not true. They're both evaluated the same way. And a poster just it can be a better way. And we have certain people who excel at doing posters and really prefer that type of presentation than others. So those are the main types: the papers, the posters, and then the organized sessions that are part of our core academic program. The two others that we have are the lightning session and the roundtable session. The lightning session is actually run by the Student Affairs Interest Group, and this is intended to be kind of quick talks, up to 5 minutes. I should mention, so paper talks we aim for anywhere from 10 to 20-minute talks, and you get to request what time you would like. But for lightning sessions, it's supposed to be a 5-minute talk followed by a 5-minute discussion. And they're very, very informal. They're held in the early evening and such, and they really go off well. Roundtable session happens on the second day over lunch, and these are more just general discussions, and it's exactly what it is, what it says. Someone will propose a topic with a short description, and the program committee will review it. And generally, they're almost always approved because it just, you get a table in the exhibit hall and people come at lunchtime and everyone sits around and discusses the topic. Sometimes it's strictly informational, sometimes it can be research based, sometimes it's just brainstorming about a potential session for the following annual meeting. But the lightning sessions and roundtables, their deadline is not until November, while the open sessions would be due in August. I think that's kind of a quick summary there. I'm sure people have some questions that we can field afterwards. You want to go to the next slide, Katie? I think this. one more thing about process. Just to go on the overall process and the guidance on how this works. So we do have two sets of guidelines. We have early guidelines, which just passed actually. And for those, we require all colloquia sessions to be submitted by those early guidelines. And the main reason that we switched to this a number of years ago, organizing colloquia it can be a lot of work. You're wrangling 6 to 8 people trying to get their papers, get your overview statement, and get it submitted. Colloquia are either they can be accepted after the initial review, they can be rejected, or they can be conditionally accepted, meaning the program committee really likes the idea of the session, but wants to tweak a couple things or ask some questions about it. And then they have until the late deadlines to resubmit their session with advice from the program committee. So that's the early deadlines. You can also submit workshops or open session papers. And the primary reason for doing those is if people need an early decision, one, to apply for funding, because some funding it's never too early to start looking for funding. I should say that. You don't want to be looking in November. You want to be looking as soon as you know you're attending. And the other is we have international presenters who might need visas or to make early travel arrangements. So this gives them an early decision. Everything else can be submitted up until those August deadlines, workshops and all the forms of open session papers. Before you submit, just a couple of quick things to be sure of. One, be sure you review the call for papers for any questions in there, word limits, other sorts of things. It also has a link to the annual meeting email, which I watch daily, and we can quickly answer all your questions. I'd also advise you, before you even start filling out the form, click on it and take a look at what information you need there. It's easy to get it all in there. You don't want to get 3/4 of the way through and then have to struggle to find it, and then the form closes by accident. I've had stories of frustration at some point, so it's easier just to get your ducks in a row before you start. The most important piece of advice, when you're filling out your abstract, these are all reviewed anonymously. We do not want the names of any presenters in there. We discourage even putting the names of anyone. You can, if you're basing it on prior research, you can cite based on so-and-so's research, but anyone who's associated with the research for the paper, we ask that you not include those. That makes it a level playing field for all the evaluations. I should also note, you do not have to be a member of the AIA at the time of submission. All accepted presenters do need to become members prior to the meeting, but we don't require to be a member to accept. So if you're not a member at this time, or your membership is lapsed, you can go ahead, and you don't have to go ahead and renew it at this point, but we'd love to have you back as a member. And I guess the last thing is the program committee review process, and just quickly on how it works. When you submit, you're going to, whether it's an organized session or it's an open session, you'll see pull downs for topics. And with all the variety that can be presented at the meeting and the research that's happening, we have a committee of, this year it's 12, it can be as many as 13, and they don't all have the expertise in every field. So the committee is broken into smaller subcommittees based around those topics, and they review all of those the submissions associated with them. So they will review all of those and vote. And if they can't come to agreement or there's questions or concerns, it does go to the full committee. So it's important to make sure that you get that topic selected when you are doing it. And it generally takes about 6 weeks from the deadline until the committee has done all of its work and we are notifying people via email whether they've been accepted or rejected. So sorry, I'm sure that's a whole lot of information I'm throwing at you there. And I'm always on email, it seems. So if anyone does have any questions at any point, please always feel free, email me and I'll get back to you right away. We can talk on the phone if you've got some more detailed questions that we need to sort through in order to get you ready to submit for the meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for breaking that all down for us, Kevin. This is really helpful to see it all explained so thoroughly. Thank you. To talk a little bit more about the abstract process and some advice for how to craft a good one, I'm delighted to bring on Dr. Megan Cifarelli, who's a professor at Manhattanville College, and she's also the chair of the programming committee for the annual meeting that selects those abstracts. Megan, it's all you.
Unmuting myself. Thank you. The abstract is the way you as an applicant will communicate with us, the program committee, about your research and what you've been working on. I want to preface this by saying that the program committee is a room full of people who want to accept papers. Just to be clear, it's not a group of people sitting around looking to reject things. We enjoy accepting papers and building the most interesting program and the most academically rigorous program we can based on your contributions. And the abstract is the way you communicate with us. A well-written abstract has a couple of different purposes, but for the primary purpose is it lets evaluators get the gist of what you're trying to present in your paper very quickly. And it also demonstrates to the evaluators your grasp of the subject matter, your method of analysis and argumentation of the material, and most importantly, your results. Next, please, Katie. There are guidelines for style guidelines for the abstract up on the website at the URL at the top of that screen. Those are mostly for formatting. They're not particularly helpful in terms of what we look for in an abstract, but I want to highlight a couple of those features and then talk to you about what we're looking for. Number one, the abstracts should describe work that's already been done in theory. So they should be written in the present tense, not in the future tense, like I will, you will. Unless you have, the abstract is not likely to be accepted. All abstracts also have to be in compliance with all AIA policies, and particularly the policies on the presentation and publication of undocumented antiquities. Please read these carefully. The annual meeting cannot be the initial scholarly publication for any object. And the only exceptions that the program committee will make is if the goal of the paper is to emphasize loss of archaeological context or what we lose when things are acquired illicitly. Next, please. Okay. This is important, and I highlighted a few things here because they're the things that come up the most often in our deliberations. Abstracts, again, describe a project and its results. The paper will develop and explain those features more fully, but there needs to be enough in the abstract for us to figure out what you're talking about. So the context information is important. Mentioning, and I know this sounds really obvious, the specific topic of your research. What are you studying? What is the data set? What is the collection, etc. You want to include a clear statement of the research question that you are looking at. Sometimes it's appropriate to discuss previous research on the state of research on the topic. And part of the reason why that can be useful is to provide number 4, which is a rationale or goal for your research. Why are these questions important? What are you contributing to the field? We like you to be as explicit and as possible with respect to your research strategy, theoretical underpinnings, and or analytical methods. How are you going about studying this material? And for reasons, it is really critical for you to include your main findings, results, or conclusions. It's not a film review that might inadvertently reveal spoilers. Your results do not spoil the process. That's the process we need to know. So when an abstract ends with hints, it feels a little bit like to the program committee like clickbait, and not like an honest presentation of what a paper has to offer. If you have conclusions, present your conclusions in the abstract. And if you have conclusions, you should be prepared to give us at least a sentence about why those conclusions are significant. What are the implications of your finding? I think that's all the slides I had. Is that right, Katie? Yeah. And I just want to, in the world of everybody does things differently, Kevin advises you not to read your papers. I've read every paper I've delivered at AIA and every other academic conferences, because as an art historian myself, not an archaeologist, that is the standard within that discipline, is to have an argument that is read out loud. So your mileage may vary. You may find that that is a better strategy for you. It will just depend on your subject matter.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Megan, for going into such details about that. That's really helpful to know all of that from the insider perspective. And to transition now, I'd like to go back to a topic that we were talking about at the very beginning, because I know that it's very pressing for lots of students and emerging professionals in archaeology of how do I get funding to attend this conference that I just have had an abstract accepted for. So I'm going to bring back Kevin and Tina. She's welcome to chime in too, to go over a little bit more details about how you can get some funding opportunities to attend the annual meeting, and maybe if there's any additional advice on how to solicit institutions like universities for funding as well.
So for the AIA, as we mentioned, there's two primary opportunities for presenters, and then a third that's open to anyone. For the graduate student travel funding and the CREST Foreign Scholar travel funding, you have to indicate that you're interested in this at the time of submission. For the graduate student travel, it's literally a checkbox with no obligation on your form. So if you're a grad student, just check the box, and then you will get emails about how to sign up for it later on. It's not a huge amount of money. It generally is between $150 to $200 per year, so it's not going to cover your entire trip, but hopefully it can at least help out along those lines. It just requires you to fill out a form later on to indicate that you are going to attend. And again, this is only for in-person presentations. It's not, or in-person participants, not for people who are participating virtually. The CREST Foreign Scholar funding is reserved for those organized sessions, those colloquia. It's funded by the CREST Foundation, and the amounts are up to $1,000 some years. It depends on the number of people that are applying for it. And each session can nominate one foreign participant to be eligible for this funding. That's all they need to do. If their session is accepted and that person attends in person, they would get it. The third that was mentioned by Tina is the McCann Diversity Grants. Those are, you actually do not need to be presenting at the meeting to be eligible for those. If you are from an underrepresented community, you can just go ahead and apply for those if you will be attending in person. And those are, I believe it's $500 for those. If you are applying for any outside grants, even your department, and you need some sort of official, you'll get an email from us saying you're been accepted and you're part of the program, but I can easily go ahead and quickly make up a nice letter on AIA letterhead that looks a bit more official, which sometimes can help with those applications to third-party groups. So never hesitate to ask if you need assistance with those sort of applications.
Thanks, Kevin. Tina, you've gone over a lot of this information already, but sneaking a little bit of a preview to a question that's been in the Q&A. Do you have any additional tips on how to solicit some more travel funding, maybe from a university or from another institution?
Yes, bribery. No, I'm just kidding. Bribery in the form of flattery works best. And by that, I mean, it's difficult because everyone has kind of a different situation, both like personally and also regarding their department. Some people have really wonderful departments that are very communicative and open, and some people don't have that. But I would start with a peer. So if you have one peer that you talk to, just ask them if they've ever, applied. I mean, quite honestly, most of the opportunities I've gotten and have, become aware about have been because of my peers. One of them is on this panel. I know about the Etruscan Foundation because of Amanda Chen. So asking your fellow peers definitely, at least for me, is the most comfortable place to start, and then working your way from there. But definitely check your university website. Sometimes Googling the specific search, like I'm at the University of Buffalo, so like University at Buffalo conference travel funding. And the page will pop up, but otherwise would be like buried in 1,000 links. But yeah, I recognize that everyone's situation is different in terms of their department, but your peers are your community. So I would start there. And then, yeah, honey catches more flies, or I know that was Malifor, but que sera, sera. I hope that was helpful.
Yes, thanks so much, Tina. That's really great. So now we are moving on to the Q&A portion of today's webinar. We'll spend a good portion of the time remaining addressing audience questions, or since there were some really great ones that have been answered already, maybe we can dive into them a little bit more for the benefit of our future people who are joining us today on our recording. Feel free to continue adding questions into the Q&A box below, and we'll see how many we can get to in the time that is remaining. But for now, why don't we start with some questions that maybe are more geared towards undergraduates. So how about can you all talk a little bit about whether undergraduates can engage in the AIA through SAIG, or are they able to participate in the annual meeting?
Sorry, I realized I typed my answer and I didn't send it. I'm sorry, anonymous attendee. Yes, in fact, one of our goals this year and also last year is to get more undergraduate engagement. It's really, really, really important. Undergraduates you have the most power in your universities, and you have the loudest voices. And we really want to foster your growth and do that as much as we can, in SAGE. So absolutely, you could email it's studentaffairs@gmail.com, or you could email me directly. Again, I'm more responsive if you email me directly. The SAGE email I check every couple of weeks during the school year, just because it's a little crazy, especially towards the end of the semester. But yes, please, if you're a member of the AIA, please join SAGE. We would love to have your input.
I had noted in there, we actually do have two specific opportunities for undergrads to present. There's an undergraduate paper session where it's just a regular open session form, same form, you just check that you're applying for the undergraduate paper session. And that one is usually chaired by a former winner of the undergraduate teaching award. And it's everyone goes in, it's known to be undergrad, so maybe it's a little bit easier. Everyone's there trying to really support them on their most likely their first paper presentation. We also have undergraduate posters. We try and group those together. We haven't had as many of those. There's a little bit more work sometimes in putting together a poster than a paper. So that is also an opportunity, and we put those and we identify those in the poster session. But if you're an undergrad and you've done those already and you want to be part of a regular paper session, you can submit to be in part of a regular paper session. Just submit in there and not tag that you want to be part of the undergraduate, and you'd be considered with the rest of the pool of individuals.
Wonderful. Now, going from undergraduates to graduate students, since we've got a graduate student paper award winner on our panel today, and some folks who are well familiar with the process of the graduate student paper award, do you want to talk about graduate student participation and the paper award in particular?
I guess I'll go. I'd be thrilled to talk about that. So the Graduate Student Paper Award is a really wonderful opportunity. And in the actual annual meeting, it kind of feels like any other paper that you might be giving. The only difference is that you typically will need to submit the text of your completed paper by December 1st to the official AIA committee. Am I correct there? Am I remembering correctly?
Yeah.
So yeah, so if you're interested in pursuing the Graduate Student Paper Award, it would really be a good idea to get started on your paper sooner rather than later. I know a lot of folks tend to wait until the annual meeting is very close to put the finishing touches on their paper. But for the Graduate Student Paper Award, you'll need to have that a little bit earlier. I will say though, having that early deadline made me a little reticent to apply, in the previous years, but having it all done and wrapped up nicely in a bow after December 1st was so amazing, because then everything was complete and ready by the time I actually got to the AIA meeting, and it went smoothly. So it's a really wonderful opportunity to be able to share your research with the sort of wider scholarly community. And receiving it also includes a few perks, as I mentioned. So there are many different benefits to it. And I would encourage you to just throw your hat in the ring. From year to year, you never know how many people are submitting their papers for the award. So you could have a really good chance depending on just what the landscape looks like that year. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thanks, Amanda. And that actually transitions really well to some more technical aspects of abstract submission. It's not uncommon as you're writing something for it to take an entirely different direction. So do you have any input or advice on staying true to what your abstract says versus going with what your research is revealing as you're writing your paper? Any takers?
I mean, I can try.
Sure.
It is in the nature of scholarship that we try to follow what the evidence tells us, and sometimes that can be difficult to predict. And sometimes your research will absolutely take a left turn in between writing the abstract, which sometimes is a summary of something you've already done, and in theory it should be, but in practice it's very often a prediction of where you think your research is going to take you. I think that's just sort of normal scholarship, that sometimes what you produce after 6 to 12 months looks a little different from the abstract. And there is an opportunity to edit abstracts, but it's really just for, correct me if I'm wrong, Kevin, for language, right? For minor corrections.
Correct. Yeah. Language and looking for those author names so we can get them to send me updates and take them out.
Yeah, yeah. But for the most part, if you were going to, if you wrote an abstract about a publication about one site and then cover something completely different, that's not as kosher as having something change a little bit as you evaluate the evidence and adapt whatever methodologies you're using.
Thanks, Megan. I
I would
appreciate
just
that.
also,
Oh, go ahead.
sorry, add really
Oh,
quickly. I
please.
think Megan makes a really good point that ideally, of course, this is not always the case, but ideally, you'll be submitting an abstract on a project you've already spent some significant time working on. And I would just recommend, if you are an undergraduate or a graduate student who's perhaps submitting to the AIA for the first time ever, it might be a good idea to submit an abstract for a paper you've already written. And that way you'll have gotten feedback on it from an advisor, and they could probably even help you format your abstract. I mean, this is not a hard and fast rule, but just knowing my own anxiety when I was first submitting abstracts to the annual meeting, I think it really helped with my peace of mind to sort of already have the project in a pretty much fleshed out form.
I want to strongly endorse that position, especially for newer graduate students and undergraduate students. I would assume that your advisor has vetted anything you're submitting if you still have an advisor. I'll leave that there.
That's a wonderful piece of advice. Thank you. Thank you so much for that. Sort of still on the same topic of abstracts, how important is it that the abstract that you're submitting be related in some way to the annual meetings theme? For example, for 2025 in Philadelphia, the theme is archaeology and the environment. If you don't have a topic that's necessarily related to that, can you still submit?
Sure. I mean, we'd like to see people sort of pick up on the annual theme so that we can create some sessions that coalesce around these ideas we think are important in the discipline. But the service that the AIA annual meetings provide to the professional community is much broader than that. It should cover any area of research that you do.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you. Let's see what else. Oh, also on the topic of abstracts and submission, if you are prolific and involved in multiple projects, can you submit more than one abstract per annual meeting?
You can submit more than one, but you can only be the primary presenter of one paper. This goes back to multiple authors. So if you can be a co-author on a number of papers, especially we understand a PI, it might be a co-author on several papers that others who are working on their project are presenting, but you can only be the primary presenter of a single presentation. You can also be a co-organizer of session or a discussant, but you can only present one paper.
Thank you for that. Thank you. Let's see.
Can
So-
I just ask a clarifying question for that,
Mhm.
Kevin? Because all of the submissions are fully anonymized, that all would happen. The vetting of whether or not somebody is presenting in multiple sessions would happen after acceptances.
Correct. Yeah. After, so if you do submit, say that you have 2 or 3 great ideas and they are present, you wish to submit on multiple, the committee wouldn't know. We would only know after the fact, and the presenter would be asked to withdraw any extra papers and pick which one they wanted to present at the meeting.
Wonderful. Thank you for clarifying those points. Great. So I think we've got time for maybe 2 more questions. So if you are, say, a first-time attendee for the annual meeting, and you have met with your advisor and you want to consider whether you want to submit an abstract and present something for the annual meeting, what are some signs to sort of lead you in the right path that your research is indeed ready for a conference presentation like this? What do you look for as a researcher?
That's a really good question. I've never presented at the AIA. To be honest, I've organized a lot at the AIA, but I've never presented, and that's a really solid question. Why am I answering it? Because I think you have to just take a leap. Eventually, I think after you've been working on something, I mean, like Amanda said, especially if you've been working on something, then you have to just trust that, you have to let go a little bit. And it's a fear factor thing. You have to just, leap off the gorge into the pool. And then it's a practice. I mean, academia is a practice and presenting is a practice. Think of it as like the theater is what I tell myself when I eventually do it. But I have no idea if that's helpful or not. But that's something I've also grappled with and decided that, yeah, you just have to take a leap.
I think other people can be useful too. I'm sorry. Like, I think your peers, your advisors, if somebody reads something that you've written or an argument that you've made and thinks it somebody else thinks it has merit, that gives you feedback that this is something that you could pursue and flesh out a little bit. And I'm sorry, Amanda, I interrupted you. Go ahead.
That was almost exactly what I was going to say. My advice was, talk to your advisor. They have every interest in sort of supporting your work if it's something that is really worthwhile and compelling. But of course, I recognize that not everyone necessarily has an advisor who has the time or availability to vet every single abstract that you submit. So this is exactly, as Megan was saying, where your peers come in, especially peers in your program who might have done it before or are a little further ahead in the program.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for offering that input. That's really good advice for folks that are waiting for a sign to submit to the annual meeting. I think this is your sign that you're ready. Great. So we've got another question that's come into the Q&A that's a little bit more technical. So when is the list of areas of interest or applicability going to be released for the submissions? Any inputs on when that's going to be available or where to find it?
Well, I think it's this goes a little bit the way that I was going to answer it and type an answer in, but you're right. This describes a little bit of needs a little bit of explanation. The AIA actually doesn't publish these sorts of things. I know others will publish session names and things that they want you to apply into. Just the way that ours is, when you're submitting, you will just pick that topic area, which just gives us guidance on where your research lies under a broad base of topics. And then we put together the sessions from all of those. So you don't actually apply into keywords or things of that nature. It's just that topic, and depending on what groups of papers we have, the sessions are created each year around them.
Great. Thank you for clarifying that, Kevin. And we've got time for one last question, and I think this is for everyone because I'm sure you all have very interesting answers, but what is your best advice for dealing with stage fright before you're about to present something at a conference?
Practice. For me, it's practice. If you in your department have friends or even mentors who are willing to do a practice run with you, that's great. But as often as you can practice your paper and really get comfortable with the words and the timing, then you'll be a pro. And sometimes you might even have it nearly memorized. And for me, having that peace of mind really makes all the difference. I know it's not the same for everyone, but that's how I've typically dealt with the stage fright.
Megan, you want to go next?
Yeah, I want to endorse one of the things that people get most nervous about is timing. And this is all extremely predictable. All you have to do is take your paper and give it once. And if it lasts 45 minutes, it's too long and you're going to need to cut it. And you're going to need to keep cutting it until you can comfortably fit it in to the time period. And it's the hardest part, but you will over time find out what your reading speed is. Mine is 125 words a minute. I cannot exceed 125 words per minute or I'll go over time. And there's nothing I have to say that is worth going over time ever, because there are other people waiting for their turn. So practice is critical, and learning the right pace for you is also critical. Not trying to add more words in by reading really quickly is not going to help you. It'll just make your entire presentation inscrutable to your audience.
Yeah, I think I would just reiterate this. I know that lots of people kind of think they thrive on doing things at the last minute. And I think Amanda hit it on the head before. It's like having stuff done earlier and not tweaking it until the final minute, that's going to create anxiety in you. It's going to make it more difficult on the time when you have to deliver it the first time to go ahead and do it. So try and have it done prior to the meeting. There's a lot going on at the meetings. There's other things you're going to want to do. You're going to want to be social and see colleagues. You're going to want to go to the first timers reception. You don't want to be pulled away at 10 o'clock at night to go work on the paper and stuff. So try and finish ahead of time. Go to the session room after the sessions are done. They're still set. Stand up there. Take a look at what it's like. It's not hard. It gets a comfort level. And in the end, everyone just gives an exhale. It's like it's over. It can be daunting and challenging, but I've seen lots and lots of successes.
Also, it's okay and normal to be nervous if you're giving your first major publication. The first one I gave, I didn't realize it, but I was rocking like a metronome the entire time. So it might not go perfectly, and everyone is really cool with that. It's fine.
And on that same note, I think another nerve-wracking part of the presenting process is the Q&A that happens afterward. But as was just said, if people know that you're an undergraduate student or an early career graduate student, no one is there to try to be aggressive and trip you up. Everyone is there to support you. So usually you get questions that allow you to sort of talk more about stuff you wouldn't have been able to fit in the 15 minutes or give you suggestions for the future.
You often see people hit their groove in the Q&A afterwards when you can tell they breathe a sigh of relief and they're into a discussion. Which is one reason I will encourage posters again. I think posters, that's almost your entire presentation. So it's a good gateway if you do have a lot of anxiety about getting in front, think about if your research would fit well into that sort of presentation style instead.
Or the lightning session, because it's 5 minutes, 5 slides. So, I mean, in some ways, I feel like that is very difficult for, especially I have the opposite problem. You can't shut me up no matter what. In fact, I wish I could like suck some stage fright out of someone. I like Bette Midler and Hocus Pocus. But yeah, the lightning round generally is really, I've found for the people who have presented at the lightning session, when I watch them, I'm like, oh man, this would be perfect for me if I wasn't organizing the lightning session. But it's a great gateway into the AIA. It's fast, it's generally painless, and people are usually like very fun when they ask questions. Yeah, sorry.
Nothing to apologize for, Tina. We're a little bit over time, but I think that it was really great hearing from all of you today, answering the questions and going over the content of today's webinar. And I want to say thank you all out in the audience so much for joining us today for the AIA Annual Meeting Submission webinar. I hope this was helpful to those of you who are considering submitting an abstract for the upcoming annual meeting. Up on the screen, you see 2 QR codes. One's for the call for papers, and the other is for the annual meeting submission form pages that are located on the AIA website. There's still plenty of time before the August and November deadlines, so if more questions come up in the next few weeks or even months as you're creating your abstract, please feel free to reach out to us at annualmeeting@archaeological.org, and we would be very happy to help. A huge thank you to Tina, Amanda, Kevin, and Megan for joining us today, and to the Student Affairs Interest Group, or SAIG, for co-sponsoring today's webinar. Thank you so much, everyone, and take good care. Bye.